At the military level, Iran has spent 25 years building defensive capabilities specifically designed to neutralize American technological advantages. This is not about matching American capabilities. This is about rendering those capabilities strategically irrelevant. Iran possesses approximately 3,000 ballistic missiles with ranges between 300 and 2,000 kilometers. These missiles are not stored in centralized facilities that can be destroyed in surgical strikes. They are distributed across thousands of underground and hardened locations throughout Iranian territory. The geography matters enormously here. Iran is a country of 1.6 million square kilometers, 4 times the size of Iraq. The terrain is dominated by 2 major mountain ranges, the Zagros and the Alborz, creating natural defensive barriers that have protected Persian civilization for 3,000 years. The population is 85 million people with a median age of 32 years. This is not an aging, demoralized population that will collapse under pressure. This is a young, educated, technologically sophisticated society that has been preparing for this specific conflict since the Iran-Iraq War ended in 1988. Iran's missile forces are not designed to win a conventional war against the United States. They are designed to make any American military victory so costly that it becomes strategically meaningless. One Iranian missile costs between $50,000 and $200,000 to produce, depending on sophistication level. One American interceptor missile costs between $3 million and $10 million. For every Iranian missile launched, America spends between 15 and 200 times more money just to intercept it. But here is what makes this truly devastating. Iran does not need to overwhelm American missile defense systems. Iran only needs to force America to expend its interceptor inventory faster than American defense contractors can replenish it. And those production timelines are measured in years, not weeks. The economic level of the trap is equally sophisticated. Iran controls the Strait of Hormuz, through which 21 million barrels of oil pass every single day. This represents approximately 21% of global petroleum consumption and 30% of all seaborne traded oil. The strait is 21 miles wide at its narrowest point. Iran has coastal missile batteries, naval mines, and fast attack craft positioned to close this strait within hours of conflict initiation. If the Strait of Hormuz closes, oil prices will spike to between $150 and $300 per barrel within 48 hours. At $200 per barrel, the global economy enters immediate recession. Fertilizer production, which depends on natural gas and petroleum derivatives, will face severe shortages within 30 days. Semiconductor manufacturing, which requires ultra-pure petroleum products, will face supply chain disruption within 60 days. The entire just-in-time global supply system will begin breaking down within the first quarter. Now, here is where the trap closes. America cannot reopen the Strait of Hormuz without invading Iran. Airstrikes alone cannot eliminate all Iranian coastal defenses. Naval operations cannot clear the strait while under missile attack from mountainous terrain. The only option is ground invasion to seize and hold Iranian coastal territory. Which brings us to the temporal dimension of the trap. And this is where American strategic planning has failed most catastrophically. Let me walk you through exactly what a ground invasion of Iran would require, because the numbers reveal why this option represents the very definition of strategic impossibility. To control Iranian territory, military doctrine suggests a ratio of 20 soldiers per 1,000 inhabitants in counterinsurgency operations. Iran has 85 million people. That ratio suggests America would need 1.7 million soldiers just to maintain basic security across Iranian territory. The United States currently has approximately 1.3 million active duty military personnel across all branches globally. Even assuming America could somehow generate sufficient forces, the logistics are staggering. Iran is separated from American bases in Kuwait, Saudi Arabia, and Qatar by either water or hostile Iraqi territory. Every gallon of fuel, every meal, every round of ammunition would need to be transported through supply lines vulnerable to interdiction by Iranian missiles and Iraqi resistance groups that have spent 20 years perfecting attacks on American logistics. The financial cost is equally prohibitive. The Iraq War cost America approximately $2.4 trillion over 8 years to occupy a country of 38 million people with largely flat desert terrain and a population demoralized by 30 years of sanctions and dictatorship. Iran is more than twice the population, has mountainous terrain that favors defenders, and has a population that has spent 25 years preparing psychologically and materially for exactly this conflict. A realistic estimate for 10 years of Iranian occupation would be between $8 and $15 trillion. The entire United States GDP is approximately $28 trillion. America would be dedicating between 30 and 50% of GDP to a single military occupation with no clear victory condition and no exit strategy. But here is what makes the temporal trap truly inescapable. America does not have 10 years to make this work. America has at most 18 months before the economic cascade triggers systemic collapse of dollar hegemony. The mechanism works like this. If oil reaches $200 per barrel and stays there for more than 6 months, countries will begin seeking alternatives to dollar-denominated oil transactions to avoid price volatility. China and Saudi Arabia have already discussed yuan-denominated oil sales. Russia is selling energy in rubles and yuan. Iran sells oil to China in yuan. The petrodollar system, established in 1974, is the foundation of American ability to run unlimited deficits without triggering hyperinflation. Foreign countries need dollars to buy oil, so they buy U.S. Treasury bonds, financing American deficit spending. If the petrodollar system breaks down, demand for dollars collapses. Treasury yields spike to attract buyers, debt service costs explode, and America faces a choice between defaulting on debt or monetizing it through inflation. This is not speculation. This is mechanical causation. And Iran knows this. Iran has been preparing for exactly this economic cascade for 15 years, building alternative payment systems, stockpiling gold, and establishing barter arrangements with China, Russia, and regional partners. So now we can see the complete architecture of the Persian trap. America faces a choice: accept Iranian regional dominance and watch the Middle Eastern order collapse, or invade Iran and trigger the economic cascade that ends dollar hegemony. Both options result in American decline. One is slow and manageable. The other is fast and catastrophic. And here is the truly diabolical element. The longer America waits to decide, the stronger Iran's position becomes and the weaker America's options become. Motivities are artificially spite, doinitiu artistitu, doinitiu artistiu artistiaritiu eins. This brings us to the historical dimension, and this is where the pattern becomes undeniable. Every empire that has attempted to conquer Persia has either failed outright or succeeded temporarily, only to collapse shortly after. This is not coincidence. This is structural pattern that has repeated across 2,500 years of history. Alexander the Great conquered the Persian Empire in 331 BC. His empire immediately began fragmenting upon his death in 323 BC, barely 8 years later. The generals who divided his empire fought each other for 40 years. The Seleucid dynasty that controlled Persian territory gradually adopted Persian administrative systems, Persian culture, and Persian political structures until they became functionally Persian themselves. Rome fought Parthia and later Sassanid Persia for over 700 years, from 1st century BC through 7th century AD. Rome never conquered Persia. The conflicts drained Roman resources, destabilized Roman frontiers, and contributed directly to Roman collapse in the West. Meanwhile, Persia survived until Arab conquest in the 7th century, outlasting Rome by 200 years. The Mongols conquered Persia in the 13th century through unprecedented brutality that killed between 10 and 15 million people. Within 2 generations, the Mongol Ilkhanate had converted to Islam, adopted Persian as the administrative language, and and become functionally a Persian state governed by Mongol dynasty. The Mongols conquered Persia and became Persian. The British Empire attempted to control Persia through economic domination and political manipulation in the 19th and early 20th centuries. The Anglo-Persian Oil Company, later British Petroleum, extracted Iranian oil while providing minimal compensation to Iran. Iranian nationalism crystallized in the 1951 oil nationalization under Mossadegh eventually expelled British influence despite CIA intervention temporarily restoring the Shah. The Soviet Union occupied northern Iran from 1941 to 1946. Stalin attempted to establish puppet states in Iranian Azerbaijan and Kurdistan. Iranian resistance, combined with American pressure and Soviet strategic reassessment, forced complete Soviet withdrawal. The Soviet Union, at the height of its power, could not maintain occupation of northern Iran against sustained Iranian resistance. The United States has been in conflict with Iran since 1979. 45 years of sanctions, covert operations, military pressure, and diplomatic isolation have not broken Iranian resistance. Instead, Iran has developed sophisticated military capabilities, expanded regional influence through proxy forces, and built alternative economic networks that reduce American leverage. The pattern is consistent. Empires that engage Persia in extended conflict either fail to achieve objectives or exhaust themselves in the process. The geography favors defenders. The population has civilizational memory of resisting foreign domination. The strategic depth allows for prolonged resistance that outlasts imperial patience. But there is a deeper pattern here that matters even more than military outcomes. Every empire that became obsessed with controlling Persia diverted resources away from core strategic priorities, created fiscal strain that undermined domestic stability, and accelerated its own decline through imperial overreach. Rome's Persian wars drained resources needed to defend against Germanic tribes on European frontiers. The Mongol conquests in Persia diverted attention from consolidating control over China. British obsession with Iranian oil contributed to imperial overstretch that culminated in post-World War II collapse. Soviet involvement in Iran diverted resources from Eastern European consolidation and contributed to superpower confrontation dynamics that eventually bankrupted the Soviet state. And now America faces the same pattern. Confronting Iran means diverting resources from the real strategic challenge of the 21st century, which is managing the rise of China and maintaining technological leadership in artificial intelligence, quantum computing, and advanced manufacturing. Every dollar spent on Iranian conflict is a dollar not spent on infrastructure, education, research, or the industrial capacity needed to compete with China. Every year spent focused on Middle Eastern security is a year China spends building alternative institutions, infrastructure networks, and economic relationships that gradually erode American primacy. This is the deeper level of the Persian trap. It is not just about whether America can militarily defeat Iran. It is about whether America can afford the cost of that conflict while maintaining the global position that makes America a superpower in the first place. Now, let me walk you through the actual scenarios, because this is where game theory reveals why there is no good option. Scenario 1, America does nothing. Iran continues regional expansion. Iraqi resistance groups attack remaining American bases in Iraq and Syria until withdrawal becomes inevitable. Houthi forces in Yemen maintain pressure on Saudi Arabia and UAE, gradually extracting political concessions. Hezbollah in Lebanon consolidates control over Lebanese political system. Hamas in Gaza receives continuous support, making permanent eradication impossible. American credibility in the Middle East collapses. Saudi Arabia and UAE begin serious diplomatic engagement with Iran to ensure security. The petrodollar system weakens as Gulf states reduce exclusive dollar dependence. American military bases in the region become untenable as host governments face domestic pressure to expel American presence. This scenario results in gradual American decline in the Middle East, but avoids catastrophic economic cascade. It is manageable decline over 10 to 15 years rather than sudden collapse. However, it requires accepting that the Middle East is no longer an American sphere of influence, which represents psychological blow to American self-perception as global hegemon. Scenario 2, America launches sustained air campaign against Iranian nuclear facilities, missile sites, and military infrastructure without ground invasion. This is the scenario that most establishment analysts consider the viable middle option. Here is why it fails. Iranian nuclear facilities are buried under mountains at sites like Fordow, requiring multiple strikes with bunker-penetrating munitions to achieve damage. Iran has spent 20 years dispersing missile production facilities across hundreds of sites. Satellite imagery and intelligence cannot locate all sites with certainty. Every facility that survives the initial strikes continues operating. Meanwhile, Iran closes the Strait of Hormuz within hours of the first American strike. Oil prices spike immediately. Iranian missiles target American bases in Kuwait, Bahrain, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, and Iraq. Some missiles get through missile defenses because no defense system is 100% effective against saturation attacks. Iraqi resistance groups, which have been relatively restrained for the past 3 years, launch coordinated attacks on American forces in Iraq. America now faces two-front war across both Iran and Iraq. The Kurdish regions of Iraq, which have been America's most reliable partner, come under pressure from Turkey, which opposes Kurdish autonomy. The air campaign continues for weeks or months with diminishing returns as Iran replaces destroyed facilities, repairs damage, and adapts tactics. Meanwhile, economic pressure builds as oil prices remain elevated, global supply chains break down, and recession begins in oil importing countries. America faces a choice. Escalate to ground invasion to finish what the air campaign cannot complete, or accept stalemate with elevated oil prices and ongoing conflict. Neither option represents victory. Both represent strategic failure at different speeds. Scenario 3, America launches ground invasion to topple Iranian government and occupy territory. This is the scenario that triggers immediate catastrophic cascade. The invasion requires mobilizing between 1 and 2 million troops, which means instituting a draft for the first time since 1973. Domestic opposition immediately begins as American families face prospect of children being sent to war with no clear connection to American security. The invasion proceeds through Iraq, requiring Iraqi government cooperation or open conflict with Iraqi forces. Iraqi resistance groups attack supply lines continuously. Every convoy requires heavy escort. Every forward base requires constant resupply through contested territory. American forces enter Iranian mountains and face guerrilla warfare from a population of 85 million that has been preparing for this scenario for 25 years. Urban warfare in cities like Tehran, with population of 9 million, makes the Battle of Fallujah look like a minor skirmish. Casualties mount. Television images of American dead and wounded dominate news cycles. Meanwhile, oil prices reach $200 to $300 per barrel and stay there. Global recession turns into depression. Fertilizer shortages lead to food price spikes. Developing countries face famines. Political instability spreads across regions dependent on food imports. China announces yuan-denominated oil purchases from Russia, Venezuela, and any producer willing to sell outside the dollar system. Saudi Arabia, facing domestic economic crisis from high oil prices devastating Asian customers who buy Saudi oil, begins accepting yuan payments to maintain market share. The petrodollar system breaks within 12 to 18 months. Treasury yields spike as foreign demand for dollars collapses. The Federal Reserve faces impossible choice between allowing yields to rise and bankrupting the government through debt service costs or buying treasuries directly and triggering currency crisis. Domestic pressure builds as war costs mount, casualties increase, and economic crisis deepens. Anti-war protests begin, political opposition intensifies. America faces prospect of withdrawing from Iran without achieving objectives, having triggered economic collapse and political crisis for no strategic gain. This scenario represents civilizational-level catastrophe for American power. It is the outcome Iran has been preparing to create for 25 years. So which scenario will America choose? Game theory suggests that decision makers, when facing only bad options, typically choose the option that delays catastrophic outcome longest while hoping circumstances change. So Arthur Oltrans arcs. That means America will likely choose scenario 2, sustained air campaign without ground invasion. This buys time, demonstrates resolve, and strike and maintains hope that something unexpected will shift the strategic equation in America's favor. But here is what game theory also tells us. When you are in a trap designed by an adversary who has been preparing for 25 years while you were distracted by other priorities, hoping for circumstances to change is not strategy, it is prayer. Iran has prepared for the air campaign scenario. Iran has hardened facilities, dispersed capabilities, and built redundancy into every critical system. Iran has established alternative economic relationships that reduce American leverage. Iran has developed proxy networks that can sustain pressure across multiple theaters simultaneously. Most importantly, Iran has structured the trap so that the longer America pursues scenario 2 without achieving decisive results, the more pressure builds toward either accepting defeat in scenario 1 or escalating to catastrophe in scenario 3. This is what makes the Persian trap truly inescapable. It is not about winning a military engagement. It is about forcing America into strategic choices where every option accelerates American decline through different mechanisms. Let me be absolutely clear about what I am not saying. I am not saying that America will collapse next year or that Iranian victory is certain in any absolute sense. What I am saying is that the structural forces at work make American strategic failure in the Middle East highly probable unless something fundamentally changes about either American approach or Iranian position. I could be wrong about the timeline. Unexpected developments could shift the equation in ways this analysis does not account for. Iranian internal instability could weaken their position. Technological breakthroughs in missile defense could neutralize their primary advantage. Saudi-Iranian rapprochement could fail and create new opportunities for American influence. But here is what I am confident about. The fundamental architecture of the Persian trap is real. Iran has constructed a strategic position where American military superiority does not translate into strategic advantage. The economic vulnerabilities are genuine. The historical patterns are consistent, and the available options all trend toward outcomes unfavorable to American interests. This analysis is not rooted in ideology or preference. This is structural analysis using the same frameworks that predicted the current Middle Eastern configuration before it materialized. The question is not whether you want these conclusions to be true. The question is whether the evidence and logic supporting these conclusions can be refuted through equally rigorous analysis. I encourage you to examine this framework critically. Look at the numbers yourself. Study the historical patterns. Analyze the geographic realities. Game out the scenarios using different assumptions. The most important thing is never to accept any analysis, including this one, without testing it against evidence and logic. What we are witnessing is a historical turning point where the Middle Eastern order established after World War II is breaking down, and the power that established that order no longer has the capability to maintain it through military force alone. How America adapts to this new reality will determine whether American decline is gradual and manageable or rapid and catastrophic. We will continue watching these developments closely. As events unfold over the coming months, we will analyze each new development through this same framework of structural forces, game theory, and historical patterns. The Persian trap is not a single event. It is an ongoing strategic dynamic that will define Middle Eastern geopolitics for the next decade. The question is not whether America is in the trap. The question is whether American leadership recognizes it before choosing the path that makes escape impossible.